Alright, I'm sure you heard about the protest happening around the United States called the hands-off protest. According to CNN, these protests were so significant that we might start to see a big drop-off with Republicans in Congress and Donald Trump as well, as far as the potential for congressmen losing their seats, etc., etc. Now, let's get through this because I think you'll find this rather interesting, and don't worry, I have a very special clip for you after this, so let's get to it.
So weekly Google searches for protests. Look at this, up 1,200% versus a year ago, and it's at or even exceeding the levels that we saw during the January 2017 protests, which you remember were everywhere. It is almost as if I feel like Frankenstein, right, saying the monster, it's alive, it's alive. The Democratic protest, the idea of protesting Donald Trump, if the resistance was a little bit lacking at the beginning of Trump's second term, it is very much alive now. The protests are out there, and the interest in protesting Donald Trump is definitely there.
Now, hold on. This is a very generic or general statement. We're not actually seeing the keywords. If you just type in protest, that doesn't mean you're interested in a protest, because I'll be honest with you, I must be involved with this search engine because I typed in protest as well, because I had no idea what they were protesting when you just call it a hands-off, considering the majority of Americans don't mind the hands-on approach of Donald Trump and Elon Musk. So again, a little bit misleading from CNN here.
Now,
what are you looking at in terms of the polling on this? The polling on resistance to President Trump, maybe now versus before?
Yeah, okay. So, you know, again, the whole thing about this second term was maybe the resistance was lacking compared to Donald Trump's first term. And one of the best ways we can understand the
First off, I would actually argue his first term, there was plenty of resistance because in context, back then, the Republican independent media, there was no foundations yet. It was just getting started. So I would actually say the resistance was way, way bigger back then. That's when you had the whole fake news, the CNN, MSNBC battles against Donald Trump. You had the Twitter stuff against Donald Trump, things like that.
Resistance is how strongly folks disapprove of the job that Donald Trump is doing as president. And I want to take a look here at a historical comparison, right? Compare where we are now in April of 2025 compared to November of 2018. And what do we see? Well, in November of 2018, the strongly disapprove of Trump was 42%. Look at where we are now, 43%. The level of strong resistance to Donald Trump now is matching what we saw back in November of 2018 when, of course, Republicans got swept out of power in the House of Representatives. It was a Democratic sweep. They crushed them, gained 40 seats. And what we're seeing now is the same level of, quote-unquote, strong resistance to Donald Trump. This is very different from what we were seeing at the beginning of Donald Trump's second term. As I said at the beginning, the resistance in the polling data, in the data on Google, suggests that the resistance is, quote-unquote, it's alive.
Okay, they keep talking about this resistance, the resistance. You mean talking about voters changing their opinions? Yeah, that's what the United States is all about. Again, I don't see any correlation of because you look up the word protest, all of a sudden that's the resistance? No, I think a lot of us were looking up the word protest again because we had no idea what was going on. This happened over the weekend. People were trying to enjoy their life and maybe we were just like trying to get some news here. But again, this correlation of resistance, I don't really know what this is about. However, I am curious what you guys think. Do you think right now there is a resistance? Leave your comments down below. And if you think this will actually impact Republicans, I truly think we are in a new era as far as information and freedom of speech. Now we can actually see members of government make their own media clips, form their own narratives. They don't need to go to the mainstream. I think contextually speaking, we are in a way different era right now.
Real world. I'm a big fan of MTV. Okay, so take a look. Special House elections, the average Democrat, how they are quote-unquote doing versus the prior Democratic nominee on average in those different districts, right? We had 2 Florida special elections last week. How much better did they do? They did 19 points better on average. In April of 2017, there were 2 special elections. The Democrats did 18 points better than Hillary Clinton did on average. What we're seeing right now in the election results, very similar to what we saw in Donald Trump's first term. And again, of course, that led to a big sweep for Democrats in the House.
Okay, first things first, is this CNN bragging about a loss? I don't really understand what the point of this graph is. If anything, we have a lot of implications here, or this might happen. Again, we have really no correlation, in my opinion, with what's happening in 2025 to 2017. The media landscape completely different, and as we know, Florida is a stronghold. In special elections, Democrats tend to vote more, so again, a little misleading. But what's not misleading are what the Democrat numbers are as far as approval and favorability. We're talking about way lower numbers than Trump's favorability and approval. If Trump's at a 43% and you're calling that bad, what are you going to call a 21% approval rating? Well, good thing for you guys, I found your favorite Democrat, one of the leading voices in the Democrat Party, Jasmine Crockett. Please do not click away. Please watch this video. Let's get through this together.
No plan, no strategy, no message. That's a quote. That's how a Democratic lawmaker was describing the Democratic Senate vote with Republicans this weekend to fund the government with a Republican funding bill, averting a government shutdown, but there was virtually no fight and nothing achieved for Democratic priorities. This comes as our brand new CNN poll this morning shows that the Democratic Party's favorability is at an all-time.
Again, way lower than Donald Trump's favorability or approval. So I find it so funny that look at the resistance. Yeah, look at the resistance.
Low in this CNN poll, it's just 29% approval. That's a 20-point drop since 2021. This has been a rough 72 hours for Democrats. I want to play some of what Democratic Senate Leader Schumer told me on The Lead on Friday about his decision to vote with the Republicans to fund the government. Take a listen.
A government shutdown gives Donald Trump, Elon Musk, and Doge almost complete power as to what to close down because they can decide what is an essential service. If they determine that SNAP, kids shouldn't get food, is not essential, they can just cut it out summarily. They could fire half the workers in the federal government. It would have been a far worse consequence.
And by the way, real quick, this is how Republicans really checkmated the Democrats. And Chuck Schumer, believe it or not, he's considered a moderate as far as his voting. And he knew no matter what happens, Democrats are in trouble. If you shut down the government, then we're not helping these federal workers we're supposed to be helping. If you don't shut down the government, as you saw, Donald Trump can do what he wants to do. And I'm sure Jasmine Crockett's going to give a really good answer here.
Saying that the path that House Democrats wanted would have presented a worse consequence. Is he wrong?
He's absolutely wrong. I mean, look at the reality of the votes, right? I understand that the American people are frustrated. Please believe many of us did not sleep because we were calling and trying to impress upon the senators the importance of pushing back in this moment. And as you saw, we had all but one Democrat in the House that voted for this. So that's 212 Democrats in the House. And then you had the vast majority of senators vote for it or vote against it as well. And so the idea that Chuck Schumer is the only one that's got a brain in the room and the only one that can think through all of the pros and cons is absolutely ridiculous. And Jake, you and I both know that this administration could care less about whether or not they violate the law. We know that we've had to rely heavily upon the courts. And I want to say, as you're talking about the polling on my party, I want to say that it is the Democratic.
Couple of things here. I have to point this out. So Jasmine Crockett, mob mentality. That's her saying it, not me. She's the one who called out Chuck Schumer and said, oh, it looks like he's the only one who has a brain and we don't. And also calling out, yeah, we are using the judicial system to our advantage. Again, Scott Jennings says it all the time. Just keep letting her talk because she's one of the greatest spokesperson for Republicans. I am really curious what's going to happen in her election on whether or not people are resonating with Jasmine Crockett. I am not convinced the majority of Democrats actually have a favorable view of Jasmine Crockett, if I'm being honest, despite my biases.
Attorney generals and some governors that are standing up against this administration and bringing those lawsuits and winning every single time. They are losing in court. Could we do a better job of making sure that the American people know that we are winning in the courts? We probably could. But at the end of the day, it's still Democrats that are winning for the American people.
Some progressive groups are calling for new leadership in the Senate for Democrats. Even House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries, your leader, He was asked if he supports Schumer as leader of the Senate, Democrats, and he said, next question. Do you...
And to give you guys some context, Democrats right now are in a very bad position. There's also polling that suggests in the 65% range, look, Democrats do not want their elected officials to side with Donald Trump on anything. So no matter what Democrats do, even if they want to work with Donald Trump, the majority of their voters don't want them to. So what are Democrats actually supposed to do right now?
Do you think Senate Democrats should replace Chuck Schumer?
I think Senate Democrats have to sit down and take a look and decide whether or not Chuck Schumer is the one to lead in this moment.
You're close with Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez of New York. Some of your fellow House Democrats say, and not just progressives, by the way, we've heard that moderates have said this too, that they're ready to support her to challenge Chuck Schumer in a Democratic primary. Would you get behind that?
That's 4 years from now. If you were asking me at least in 2 years, then I would have an absolute answer. But I can tell you that there are a lot of people that are watching his leadership in this moment. This is the moment. We don't even know what elections will look like in 4 years.
I do find it rather interesting, the inability for Democrats to even support one another in this moment. I mean, AOC and Jasmine Crockett, they're supposed to be super tight and super close, but it doesn't look like anyone is really willing to stick their neck out for anybody. I do find that rather interesting in the landscape of a Democrat. I'm not a Democrat, don't vote Democrat. I'm just saying, looking from the outside in, it looks a little cutthroat right now. And again, I think they're kind of walking on eggshells in that party, because any wrong move, and Jasmine Crockett does take a very extreme stance as far as being out there and saying what she wants to say, you almost have to respect that a little bit, because out of everybody, she really is the most public, maybe to her own detriment, but out of everybody else, I mean, everyone's afraid to say something about the other person, whether positive or negative, just in case they do something a little outrageous, according to Democrats. Like, if you supported Chuck Schumer in the past, maybe you can't support him right now because of what he did as far as siding with Republicans. Again, walking on eggshells in the Democrat Party.
Years if we will have elections. And so I definitely think that younger, fresher leadership may be something that many of us, not just depending on what part of the spectrum you're on, but many Americans may be looking for, especially in the state of New York.
All right, if you are still watching this video, I really appreciate it. There is so much going on right now. There's a lot of turmoil, according to some people. But again, I am really curious how you guys feel about the protest and the resistance. In my personal opinion, even with my biases, I still do think that the Democrat Party is dealing with more resistance and more protest on paper than Donald Trump. It's just happening behind the scenes. So anyway, thank you guys for being here. God bless, and we'll see you all later.